So yes, we know our place value now because we went over decimals yesterday. Those place values are going to be helpful with what we're doing today. What are we doing today? I will tell you. We're going over adding and subtracting decimals. Pretty straightforward. Again, all in preparation for the big one, fractions, because decimals and fractions are very, very tight. They're relatives. They love each other. They're very tight. So we got to be masters at decimals. How to round them, what's the place values, and yes, how to do decimal operations. So, for example, let's say we're given a problem like this. We're given add 0.37 plus 13.5 plus 2.638. What must you do in order to add all of these together? Yes. Yes. So, do you remember how we add whole numbers? How do we place them? Yep. This is the same thing. You're going to make it all stack up with each other. But you aren't going to just line up. You aren't just going to line it up by the last numbers. Like if this is the last number of the 7 and this is the last number of this 5, you're not going to just line it up like that. You aren't going to put the last numbers at the end. That's the last thing you want to do, all right? The rule when adding and subtracting decimals is quite simple. Line up the decimals. So over here I have a 0.37. And the next one is 13.5. You must line up the decimal, put the 5, and then put the 13. Did you see what I did? Now, there is a third number here. How about we put that into the mix? Where should I put my decimal? Obviously, underneath the rest of the decimals. And obviously, the 2 and the rest must be placed in its appropriate spots. Right? Now, yeah, what do we do here? Add our friendly zeros. Why? Because they make everything look so nice and jam-packed and organized. Now, guess what, you guys? It is just a straightforward, and by straightforward, I mean straightforward addition problem. If we look at our first place value, first tell me one thing. What is the place value of all these digits? Let's practice our place value skills of decimals. What's the place value of this 0, 0, and 8? Well, this is my ones. That means this is my tenths, I should say. Hundredths, thousandths. Good. So guess what? Add up the thousandths place first. What's 0 plus 0 plus 8? What's 7 plus 0 plus 3? And if we recall from our first week of adding whole numbers, we must carry over the 1, put the 0 there because it's a 10. Then how about we add up our tenths place? What's 1 plus 3 plus 5 plus 6? 1 gets carried over, the 5 gets there because it's 15.
Put your decimal and then 7.
Yes. Put your decimal place. All you're doing is bringing it down and placing it right there. That was the whole point of lining up the decimals. All right, so move on. Now we're in my ones place. What's 1 plus 0 plus 3 plus 2? 6, my friend. And now what's 0 plus 1 plus 0? 1. Guess what? It's 16.508. Now, again, to practice our skills of rounding, what if I were to say round this to the nearest hundredths? What's my final answer?
0.
Cool. What's the final answer?
You leave it as is.
If we recall, we go to the hundredths place, look to its buddy, ask whether it falls under the 1 to 4 or the 5 to 9 rule. It falls under my 5 to 9 rule, right? Because it's an 8, which means it becomes a 16.51. Why? Because the place value that it's telling me to round goes up by 1.
So how did you drop the 8?
You make it a 0. You make everything
You
after.
counted for it? You count for it? Or make it counted for?
No. So the initial problem was 16.508, right? 16.508. If it says round this to the nearest hundredths, I go to the hundredth spot. I look to its buddy. Is that 8 higher than 5?
Yes.
Which means my hundredth spot must go up 1, and the rest becomes 0. So my 0 goes up by 1, and the rest just vanishes. It goes 0. The 8 becomes 0. Everything else becomes 0. But guess what? You don't have to put zeros after your decimal. So the answer is 16.51. So, what's the rule that we got to take away from adding decimals?
1, 4, 5, 9. Adding decimals?
Yeah. Hi. So what is the rule when adding decimals? What must you do first?
I don't know.
Line up the decimals, right? Line it up. That rule is the same rule for subtraction. So if we're given something like this, how about we say a word problem like find the difference between 14.512 and 8.7. 14.512 and 8.7. What is the difference between 14.512 and 8.7? Well, again, what's my rule when adding or subtracting decimals? Line up the decimals. So you write it out like this. You see that? Now what I do? Add them, famous zeros. How many zeros are in front of a number? That's exactly right.
Oh, okay, cool.
What did you say? Yes. That's exactly right also. It's just there. She did this in the back. And that's right too. This is okay. You can't write this on the test, but I know what you mean. And there's an infinite amount of zeros in the front. How many zeros are in the back of a number? 0.000. An infinite amount. Zeros are our friend. All right. So we lined up the decimals. The problem was saying find the difference. So what must I do? Subtract. What's 14.512 minus 8.7? Well, I already lined it up. Now all you must do is subtract regularly. What's 2 minus 0? Huh? What's 1 minus 0? What's 5 minus 7? Guess what? It can't be done because the 5 is less than 7. So the last thing you want to do is think of it as 7 minus 5. Now, just a side note, there is a negative, but we're not messing with that just yet. That fun will come later, trust me, when we get into the negative world. But whatever. Right now we have to do what? In order to do this operation right here, 5 minus 7. What must I do?
Make it into a 15, but borrow from the 4.
Sure, you want to borrow from the 4 and make it into a 3? And then take that 1 that you took out from the 4 and put it next to the 5, making it a 15, right? So now ask yourself, what's 15 minus 7? 8. 8. What must I do next? Bring down that decimal. All right. Now, what's 3 minus 8? Uh-oh. It can't be done. So what must you borrow from? You must borrow from the 1. Make it into 0. Make that 3 into a 13. This all ringing a bell from the first week when we were subtracting whole numbers? So what's 13 minus 8? 5.812. That's my final answer. That's that's the difference between 14.512 and 8.7. Now, just for fun, what if I were to say round 5.812 to the nearest tenths?
It would remain same as 8 for 1 and slow.
Okay, so what's the final answer?
5.8.
Boom, done. 5.8. This is my tenths place. This is my tenths place. You look to its buddy. If it's below 5, if it falls under the 1 to 4 rule, this one stays the same and the rest becomes 0. And that's what the final answer is. Right? Pretty straightforward. A little too straightforward, but straightforward enough. Okay, so what do we learn? What is the rule when adding or subtracting decimal numbers?
Line them up with the decimal.
The rule is line up the decimals. So if you're given, again, one more example. Let's just do one more example. So we're given 15.38 plus 0.02 plus 1.25. What must you do? Line up the decimals, right? So let's line up the decimals. That's the first number. The next number is a 0.02. Then comes my 0.25 and a 1 there. Then what? Add them up after you add additional zeros to help you visually see better, right? And then we just add it up. What's 8 plus 2 plus 5?
15.
What's 1 plus 3 plus 0 plus 2?
7.
6.
6.
What's decimal plus decimal plus decimal? What's 5 plus 0 plus 1? And 1 plus 0 plus 0? 16.65. This is the rule for adding and subtracting. Line up the decimals. Boom. Bang, bosh. Done. Tomorrow, I think tomorrow we're just going over multiplying decimals. So not only are we getting familiar with multiplying by hand, but now we're incorporating decimals into it. So that's going to be fun. And then after that comes, today's Tuesday, right? Tomorrow's Wednesday, Thursday, then the quiz. That means tomorrow we're doing multiplying and dividing. That's what we're doing. And then comes the quiz. Yep, that's what that means. But no problem. Why? Because we already know how to do multiplication and division by hand, right? We already know how to do it for whole numbers, right? Right? Jeez. Yep, multiplying, dividing decimals. That comes tomorrow. So, that being that, all we're doing today is adding and subtracting decimals. Any questions? Alrighty.